Today we're going to be building a BMW M30 inline 6 engine. I have everything we need laid out here, so we're going to dive right in. The M30 in question is an M30 B30 from my 71 3.0 CSI. I decided I wanted to go through and fully refresh this engine to make it as best as it can be. I went ahead and refinished everything that can be refinished. We're going to replace everything that needs to be replaced, and we're going to have basically a bulletproofed M30 and an M30 that looks pretty good. So here laid out is all of the parts we need. I'm going to run you guys quickly through everything that we have here, and then we're just going to dive into the work. So for this engine, I wanted it to be basically looking new, and you see there's also drivetrain components. We're also 5-speed swapping the car, but we're not focusing on that. But anyway, I wanted the engine to basically look brand new, not need any service to be performed, and I just want it to be a pretty engine for a pretty car. So here we have obviously all of our seals, and I don't have them all laid out, they're all in the box, but every gasket necessary. We have the recoated manifolds, that's the 5-speed swap kit, new head bolts, timing chain stuff. So you can see here all the vapor honed parts, the manifolds, valve cover, timing components. Everything basically aluminum was honed, and there's no better finish than a vapor hone. It is exactly how OEM should look because it's not actually like paint, it's just cleaning these to what they should be like. We have our head here, freshly back from the machine shop. We'll discuss everything that went into that later. The block here, even though we're not gonna be rebuilding the bottom end because it's simply not necessary, we had 180 PSI across the board compression. The cylinder cross-hatching looks fantastic. There was no issues with the block, so we're not gonna do anything there. But I did go ahead and repaint it, so we did all the wire wheeling, all the materials necessary to make the block look really good. We painted it a nice flat black, as it should look like from factory. So the block is beautiful. You can see there's our Euro higher compression piano top pistons. That's staying as it is. We're just resealing it, putting the head back on, and then we're going to obviously be doing all of this. What we're going to be doing here applies to any M30 through the E9 all the way to the E34 535. It's the same general premise. So the cylinder head I picked up from the machine shop. I had it decked, hot tanked, valve job was done, so they regrinded all the valves. We had brand new valve stem seals put in, which had to come from Germany. So we basically have a fully fresh head. Now here is the value of a good machine shop. So even though it ran good, we had two intake valves that are actually bent. Not conventionally bent that you can see it, but they are just warped enough to where my machinist noticed when he was lapping them, and I'll probably have to flash a picture, it's gonna be very hard to tell. There is a change in the finish, right? So when they're grinding these down, you have a set height on the grinder or whatever, and it was going around and it spins the valve, and it was hitting part of it and not the other part, which tells you that this is not a perfectly, shaped valve because the grinder was touching one place, not the other. That happened on both of these, which means these were bent and problematic. Now, did I bend these removing them? Maybe. So I have the head carefully spaced on wood so that the valves can all go up and down when I do start to set in the rockers. So anyway, I got two new old stock intake valves off eBay, so we're all good. I'm gonna go ahead and use some assembly lube here in the journals for the cam and the rockers. Camshaft going in. Now we can start knocking in our rocker arms. So I got everything laid out on the table here, exactly how they were in the engine, and hopefully these go in fairly easy with a clean head. So our first retainer is going on with the kind of open end facing that way. The rocker. And then it's washer and spring, so once we get to that point, then we can start using the other rocker arm. So this is interesting because now we are starting from the middle that way, and we're gonna be starting here, right? So we're gonna have to start grabbing all of our pieces. Keeper, rocker, washer and spring. Boom. Back over here, keeper, rocker. And I'll pull this back. Okay, we got the rocker, we got the washer. Now spring. Yeah, luckily when you do all the head work, it gets easier to get these in and out, because tapping them out, which I didn't film, is always hard. And if it's really hard, then you have a head that is messed up. Like my M30 B35 that we did not too long ago, we had a completely warped head, and that does not let you get the rockers out. So you will be very frustrated, you'll be pounding away, and that's why. You just gotta go for it. You gotta get it all the way in so that a head bolt will go through there. I think that's perfect. We'll grab an old head bolt and it should drop through, yep. And this shaft needs to be spun, and that's why you have the blind or the bind plugs that go in the end, and then this will help us twist this rocker shaft. Then we use that to twist our shaft so that it lines up. Boom. That side is complete. Now we can go ahead and do this side. So it's going to be spring, washer, rocker, keeper. We might run into less issues here if I go ahead and tap this in with my tools. Voila. So now I can go through and put all the retainers so I don't have to worry about these slipping around anymore. So we go and we're going to adjust the cam so that we can get all of them freely, right? So you want the lobe down, you could get it, pop the retainer on. If there's one that's on a high point, spin the cam, and good to go. So I'm going to pop the rip gloves off for this one because these things like to sneak away. Boom, so then your rocker is set. Bada bing. Our valve train is all back together, so now let's crank her over and see how she does. Looks good. Now I think we can actually set our valve lash. For adjusting the valves on these, the spec is 0.010 to 0.012 on the, obviously, the lash side. But a little trick of the trade I like to do is 0.009 between the cam and the lobe. It's a better reading because they are less prone to wearing like the eccentric is. So I like to do that. And typically, the 0.009 on the cam will match the 0.010 or the 0.012 on the eccentric. So we're going to go through and we're going to do that. So you want your cam lobe for the rocker that you're doing to be down as if it was down to the block. Adjustment nut should be loose. Get this in the eccentric. So we're going to go with the go, no go here, meaning the 0.010 should not fit. So it fits, so we got to go a little tighter. Doesn't fit. 0.09 fits. Tighten our locking nut. We're going to go through and do all these, and I'll see you guys here when we're all within spec. Mind you, adjusted valves should have just a little bit of motion. So you could hear that one right there. Just a little bit of tapping. And we are done. All of our valves are adjusted. We could put our collar back on and our collar nut. This is our cam retainer right here to make sure your camshaft doesn't slip out. Now our flange. So there is a keyway on this, so you can't mess it up. This goes on first, I believe, and then it bends up and locks this nut. We're not going to be able to torque this yet because there's nothing that's going to stop it from spinning. Once the head is on the engine and it's timed, then we will go back and do our final torque of this. For now, we'll just hit it with the... There's a paint mark on mine right there, and it lines up with this right here, and it should also coincide with the bolt hole. I'm not sure if the paint marking is always there or if this was done prior on this engine, but you could see paint, this, and your bolt. So that's how you know technically right now the head is at TDC. Both of our valves are closed on cylinder 1, and I believe 6, they are closed. And our head is assembled and ready to go on the engine. Before we go about putting the pan on, we're gonna go ahead and do the rear main seal. So we got the block off the stand on a sketchy table, but I still got the hoist holding it. So we're gonna pop this off, get the rear main into the new, or I guess reuse the cover, get the rear main into the cover, and then reinstall. This gasket looks old, man. I don't know if it's ever been replaced. It's breaking up like plastic. I would say this is probably original. This is a genuine seal. And given the color, man, this could be an original rear main. Might have never been done on this car. And we always take our old one and use that as the template. We got the surface clean. We got some reseal right here for our choice of RTV for this particular build. Got the crankshaft seal installation tool, which keeps it from ripping over the crankshaft. Make sure it's around the crank. Beautiful. So we're going finger tight. We're gonna let this cure for a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll do the final tightening. We're back on the stand. We got both the oil pan and the block cleaned. I got RTV on both. It's time for us to install our fresh oil pan with the gasket. Again, reseal on all the surface. Brake cleaner, all the bolts in a water bottle. Gets them nice and clean. While we're waiting for that to cure, we're gonna go ahead and start getting the front timing cover on. So we got brand new chain guides. This is your tensioner rail. This is your guide. RTV is on the block. Okay, now I first made this mistake On my first M30, where I did not have this chain tensioner set up right. And what I mean by that, this right here, this needs to be in the slot right here for the tensioner. The first time I did it, I kept it like this, and you're screwed. You gotta take it all apart and redo it. Boom. It slots in very nicely. Let's get out of my way, Mr. Chain. Get our trusty guide. Power steering bracket goes on this one. Pan, front timing cover, torqued. I'm gonna clean out the head stud or the head bolt holes because these cannot have fluid in them or debris or whatever, because when you're torquing those head bolts, you can crack your head because of the hydraulic pressure. We're about ready for the always fun, never scary Jesus nut torque. So we got the tires, some wood underneath the front of the engine so that there is no sag on the engine. You will really mess things up if you try to do this torque with the engine hanging on the stand. You will break the engine off the hoist, you'll break the stand, you'll do something bad. So hub, sprocket, there is a keyway on there. 325 foot-pounds. I went ahead and purchased a crank holder because there's just no way to do this without these. I've done the DIY method. Unless you build yourself a really good tool, you end up damaging your hub or something. We'll get this on here, line up a couple holes. And I found that the easiest thing to do is get an engine hoist arm and put it around the crank holder, and then you have all the leverage in the world. Jack handle will work, but this crank holder is a little too thick for a jack handle, so I use my engine hoist arm. Had luck with this before. 325 foot-pounds. We're gonna go with the snap-on torque wrench to its limit, which is 250, and then we'll move over to our 3/4 breaker bar and we'll send it all the way. $250. The right tools make this an easy job. So 3/4 inch, 3-foot breaker bar. And now we just throw our weight on it and we're done. I would say that's probably it. Give it one last for good measure. Okay, and there you have it. Crank nut made easy. That was all of 45 seconds. Spend the $65 on the holder. Get yourself a jack handle or a leg and get yourself one of these big boys on Amazon. All in all, you're gonna be looking at like $100 in tools, but man, does it make doing this easier. Nothing breaks, nothing, any of that. So well worth it in my book. So I didn't film it this time around, but if you guys have seen my other M30 video, to get the block surface prepped, I used a grinding stone, like a flat knife sharpening stone with soft and coarse grit, and you do a couple passes back and forth, and then to finish it off, we use 400 grit sandpaper on the stone, flat, and we just do this, right? We're not looking for a perfect machine to finish. We just need it to be clean and flat, and I mean, we should all be good there. Crazy enough is there's no dowel on these E9 dampeners. It's literally, you're on your own. But we know TDC means that the piston at the front is at the top. And we gotta not get our chain stuck. So it should be right there. Obviously our paint marked OT mark should be right there. So then there should be a bolt hole on the harmonic balancer that lines up in correspondence. A bolt hole, OT mark, right at the timing cover, at the top. So that's how we know the block is at top dead center. Same thing, we're gonna clean the bottom of the head. You can see there, hole and flange. And then your cylinder 1 cam lobe should both be facing down, which means your rockers have slack in them. Number 6 is at a perfect overlap, meaning you got the back one that goes that way, front one's going this way. Head is at TDC, block is at TDC, time to combine them. We got our beautiful brand new head gasket from Europe. Time for the cylinder head. Brand new head bolts, cannot reuse them. And we have the threads oiled ever so slightly. So we got our oil sprayer here. Might as well get the new crush washers and actually install this properly. And then we got new crush washers, one underneath the bar, one above. About 12 Newton meters of torque on these. Now we can go back to our head bolts. The head gasket comes with instructions, though I think it's pretty much the same between all of them. So our stage 1 is 58 to 62 Newton meters. Then we gotta wait 20 minutes, and then we gotta do 78 to 82 Newton meters. Then we have to start the car, run the car to operating temp, turn it off, and then we gotta do 30 to 40 degree angles. So we cannot finish the torque procedure until the car is running. I kind of hate that about these because I wish I could just be done with it, but we can start with the first one. So to start, 58 to 62 Newton meters. And then we got to follow, obviously, the pattern. So we're starting in the middle and then basically crisscrossing our way out. The pattern is right here if you're looking for it. Stage 1 is done. Now we wait 20 minutes. Round 2, 78 to 82 Newton meters. And we are done with stage 2. So like I said, stage 3 we can't do until the car runs. So trust me, that will come later. So now we're ready to time it. So check this out. Remember these marks I had? Well, we got the mark on the flange and here. And the chain mark is not lined up, but the chain spins, so it doesn't matter. But we are lined up perfectly with the hole on the engine. Just gotta get our dowel in. Boom. Look at that. And all 4 of your holes line up. We can tension the chain now, and then we will tighten down the cam nut. I don't want to do it now because I don't want to lose any timing because of the slack right here. In order to tension this properly, we first need to fill the hole right here. There's a little slot, and you fill that up with engine oil, and then your tensioner, you basically push on it until it gets very firm. So we're going to fill up this little chamber. Brand new spring. And the tapered end of the spring goes into the nut here. Brand new crush washer. And then the tensioner drops in here, and obviously it goes into the rail. There's slots for it. So we go here until it is very difficult to do so. I think we need a little bit more oil in here. You can see now I'm getting to a point where I cannot push it back by hand. So we're getting there. It's kind of weird. You got to keep like topping it off and you got to hold it a little bit. You got to play with it. You'll know though, I mean, it gets hard. Like right now, I cannot retract it by hand and that's how it should be. So set that up. And then we got to counter hold it with this. And there you go, look. I love when building an engine, things go that good. So our marking on the nut matches the marking on the flange, marks the marking on everything else. So we know we torqued it identically how it should be. Our locking collar. I guess let's give it a couple test cranks, see if we hear anything wrong or something bad. Get it to TDC on the head as well. Beautiful. Time for our upper timing cover. So this, you get machined with the cylinder head. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but when you're decking your head, you need to deck this with it bolted on, because if you don't, you're gonna have the different sized thingy and it's not gonna seal properly. So, just a word of caution. Our distributor drive on there, you don't want to forget that. Torque in the harmonic balancer, 16 foot-pounds. Oil pressure sensor with a new crush washer. Rubber ducky gasket on the back of the head. It looks like a rubber ducky, that's where it gets its name. You gotta be careful when you're RTVing this. These are 2 oil channels, so you don't wanna RTV in those oil channels. And then this one's got the bolt with the thick washer, the sealing washer on this side, because that one, the oil channel actually goes where the bolt is, so there's a seal built into that washer. Oil filter housing going back on. Fresh valve cover gasket. Now typically you would RTV the corners, and I actually like to RTV the whole thing. However, since we have to run the car for 20 minutes and then retorque our head studs, our head bolts, should I say, we're not gonna use any sealant because it's just gonna make it messier later. Since the valve cover will be off anyway, I'm gonna pour some oil all over the head, just to keep things lubricated when we go to fire her up. Our beautiful vapor honed valve cover. Oof, yes, that looks good. OCD check, everything in here is good. Torque the sprayer bars, torque the head bolts, it's timed. Yeah, we're good. So we got our oil filter assembly here. A little confusing on the E9, there's a spring down there, then there's a kind of a washer that goes on the filter, and your filter should be kind of springy inside. Not sure why. New crush washer on the bolt, new O-ring around the top. So we can throw this in. Time for our brand new water pump. This also had to come from Europe. RTV specific for coolant things on the block, RTV on the pump, and then the gasket in the middle. It's always a good idea to RTV this. These are really thin, crappy paper gaskets, and a cast iron block, you know, over time just gets pitted and aged. So you want to help it out where you can. All RTV, let it cure for about an hour before we do the final torque. Unfortunately, I had this vapor honed as well to match everything else, but we discovered there was a hole in it. These rear necks are notorious for just getting eaten away by water, coolant, corrosion, because they're rarely serviced, rarely touched. So this, you know, we got holes in this spare. This is the one off the engine, hole there. Luckily, I found one good one. So yes, it's not as pretty as the rest of the engine, but it's at least not full of holes. Temp sensor with a new crush washer. Time for our thermostat housing. There's no real arrows on it, but typically you want this to be horizontal, the 80 at the top. Mind you that the engine sits on an angle, so we're gonna throw it in on an angle, about there. Mounting bracket back in. $18 Nm on the thermostat housing to the head. For the exhaust, we got the Ireland Engineering exhaust stud kit. Comes with nice black studs with a hex in them, so you could thread them in without double nutting, which is super annoying. And then nice copper hardware. So these are gonna look really pretty. Look at that. It turned what would probably take an hour of double nutting each one, taking them out, turns that into about 2 minutes. Freshly refinished exhaust manifolds. Whew, that looks good with the black. Fresh hardware. We got our specific heat shields right here. I also painted these same color as the headers. Alternator bracket. Bracket goes there. This one goes there. Distributor, pop it in. Easy as that. We're gonna do the final workings of this once the engine's in, but I just wanted it to be in place so you guys could see. Get the alternator set up. You get the nut to tighten the alternator, and then you get the ground strap from the alternator. You get the next nut. Water pump, pulley, fan clutch. Belt. Oh, we're on the wrong. We gotta go on this one. The front one's for the power steering. It's about good. And there we have it, this lovely M30 B30, fully refreshed, fully resealed, ready to go back into its E9. My E9 misses its engine, so it's time to reunite the two. This one felt good. I went above and beyond. I took what I learned from my first B35 build in the E28, and I improved and made it better. We have refinished just about everything on the engine aside from maybe the motor mount arms. It looks great. Paired up with the new 5-speed trans, this E9 is gonna be better than ever, and I am really excited. This engine came out absolutely fantastic. I couldn't be happier. Hope you guys enjoyed this little quick engine rebuild video. Not maybe quick, but either way, and I had fun. I hope you guys did too, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.